In this video, we're going to be diving into all of Henry's confirmed and unconfirmed children, and we're going to see how they might have looked in real life using my technology and Photoshop skills, transforming their many portraits. So let's get started. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more historical recreations, and let me know in the comments who you want to see in real life. Henry's first marriage was with Catherine of Aragon. His first was a stillborn daughter, and then he had a son, Henry, Duke of Cornwall. This was Henry's firstborn son, who was intended to inherit the crown. Huge celebrations were taking place. However, 7 weeks later, he died. 2 more sons would succeed the Duke, but neither survived. Mary, history would know her as Queen Mary I, or Bloody Mary, was Henry's 5th child and the only one of his first marriage to survive. Her recreation is in a separate video on my channel. I have one of her. And then finally, he had one last daughter with Catherine who didn't survive. From this point forward, there would be no more children with Catherine, because this is when he starts to father illegitimate children, as his marriage with Catherine goes sour. His first illegitimate was Henry Fitzroy. Fitzroy was the only acknowledged of his illegitimate children and would receive a double dukedom, as it's thought Henry was considering him to become his heir since no legit sons were surviving. Fitzroy's mother was lady-in-waiting to Catherine of Aragon, Elizabeth Blount, and she was also Henry's most successful and longest mistress. It is speculated that she had another child with the king, named Elizabeth Tailboys, but Elizabeth was never recognized. Fitzroy was hugely celebrated and lived life like a royal son of Henry, but unfortunately he died 10 years before the king, leaving the king without a male heir again. As Fitzroy, though, was married, he had no issue. At this time, in 1536, Anne Boleyn would have just died, and Henry would have newly married Jane Seymour. Before we get ahead of ourselves, after Henry's last daughter with Catherine of Aragon, and before he married Anne Boleyn, this was the time when the rest of his illegitimate children were born as well. And this was towards the end of his marriage with Catherine of Aragon in the 1520s. Keep in mind, all of these kids, if indeed were Henry's, were under the table. Secrets only their mothers would know, and not thought of in any way as the king's kids. They were brought up in their own households and lived life as such. So after Fitzroy was born, Henry fathered Thomas Stukeley. Thomas's mother was Jane Pollard, Henry's mistress, who came from an ancient gentry family. He had military talents and good connections within the courts of Europe because his mother and his father, not Henry, came from good families. But he was a rogue. He was a mercenary, fought for fortune, and he didn't give a fart about Elizabeth I. He had a colorful life, being arrested multiple times, traveling all around Europe, and spending. He was like a pirate, but not really. He died in battle in his 50s. He had one child. After Thomas came Richard Edwards. His mother was a poor woman who might have had an affair with the king. Since he was poor, what connects him to Henry is that he got a university education. Perhaps Henry sponsored him, or there could have been multiple reasons how he got it. Either way, he was a poet, a playwright, and a composer, even performing before his potentially half-sister, Queen Elizabeth I. He got a job in the Chapel Royal as a master of the children's choir, which was like the choir for the royal family. He married. He had a son named William, who was also a poet and composer. Then you had Catherine and Henry Carey. They were the 2 eldest children of Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister. Both children were courtiers being employed in the court of both Henry and Queen Elizabeth. Catherine was maid of honor to Anne of Cleves and Catherine Howard, Henry's 4th and 5th wives, and then she became Queen Elizabeth's best lady-in-waiting. Henry and Catherine were Queen Elizabeth's maternal first cousins through their mother Mary Boleyn, Elizabeth's aunt. And Henry Carey assumed many offices inside of court, and he even became a baron himself. Elizabeth held a closeness to her Boleyn cousins. She never recognized them though as potentially half-siblings. Both, coincidentally, had 16 children, who also retained posts within Elizabeth I's court. Catherine died at 45 and her brother at 70 years old. In 1527, Henry had Ethelreda Malte, nicknamed Audrey. We don't know much about her mother, only that she was recognized as a Joan Dingley. She could have possibly been part of the lesser nobility or even as far down as a laundress. Her putative father received land and property from Henry once he, the other father, recognized Audrey as his illegitimate child. Audrey inherited that and eventually got married. She was also one of Lady Elizabeth, the future Queen's lady-in-waiting. She was present at Elizabeth's coronation, but she died the same month in her 30s. She had one daughter. In 1528, Henry's last known thought to be illegitimate child was born, John Parrot. His claim as Henry's son is even weaker than the previous children mentioned because, according to the books, his mom, who was briefly Henry's mistress, and the king weren't in the same place at the same time, but his appearance and his temperament reflected Henry. So the claim is very, very loose, but he was a member of parliament, he was a knight, holding several high positions within the kingdom, even as Lord Deputy of Ireland representing Queen Elizabeth. He soon gained an unenviable reputation for violence and he barked with an iron fist. But with great power came great enemies, and he was accused of treason and he died in prison, possibly from poison. He was about 63. He had 3 legit and 4 illegitimate children. After John was born in 1528, that's the time Henry was beginning to court Anne Boleyn, and it seems he begins to focus more on virtue because there aren't any more illegitimate children after this as we know it. With Anne Boleyn in the 1530s, he fathers Elizabeth, the future queen, and then 2 more sons, but they didn't survive. By the way, if you haven't already seen, I do have a video recreation of Elizabeth with her facial scars, and all the link to that is in my description. Then mid-1530s, he gets rid of Anne, and he marries Jane Seymour, and she fathers his son and only heir, Edward VI. A little bit on Edward. Edward was a bit of a radical, and when he was born, his older sister Mary was 21 and Elizabeth was 4. Edward would reign for 6.5 years, from ages 9 to 15, far from being dominated by ambitious regents such as the Dukes of Somerset and Northumberland. He had strong opinions, ideas of his own, and all the makings of a tyrant. In short, he was a chip off the old block. His radical thoughts condensed into figuring out ways for his subjects to conform to his Protestant faith. Edward's own diary portrays him as cold, unfeeling, and uncompromising, a dangerous blend of traits that might have hardened into tyranny had he survived. In 1552, age 14-15, he got measles and he got smallpox, and this weakened his immune system and he continued to get sicker. He died in 1553, 15 years old. And those are Henry's children. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments who you want to see in real life, and make sure to check out Mary, Elizabeth, and the rest of his family. I have recreations on them. The link is in my description, and I will see you in the next one.